welcome to The Point. It is Monday, August 9th, 2021. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, GBN TV channel 7, 11, and 20. Good morning to the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9, and all the folks joining us on Party Grenada and Go to FET Facebook pages. It is a pleasure to have you joining us for To The Point, the very first one of the week. And this morning, we are looking back at the folks, the men and women that represented us at the 2020-2021 Tokyo Olympics. And this morning I have joining me virtually is the interim president of the Grenada Athletic Association, Aaron Moses. I am also expecting to be joined by recently elected president of the Grenada Amateur Swimming Association, Neil Francis. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, we'll call it. So hopefully he'll be able to join us as we continue the program and we have the discussion with Mr. Moses to start. So let's say good morning to Mr. Moses, sir, and thank you for joining us on To The Point this morning.
Good morning to all your listeners. It's a pleasure to be here, as usual.
Appreciate it, sir. So like I said this morning, we're looking back at the performances of our Olympians. We had 6-member team at the Olympics, 4 track and field athletes and 2 swimmers. And as the interim president of the GAA, the Athletic Association, let's look at our track and field athletes first. Hopefully Mr. Francis can join us later. Before we get into the specific performances of the athletes, overall, Mr. Moses, what are your thoughts on how the athletes represented and competed at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics?
Well, generally, I think the Olympics went off extremely well, given the challenges and the circumstances under which it was held. There was tremendous debate about whether it should not be further cancelled in its entirety. And the Japanese persevered, and I think despite the structural changes, the primary one, of course, being that spectators were not allowed in any large numbers and only in specific venues. I think the Olympics 2020 was an extremely successful one from the point of view of 2 things. One, I think the event was well managed from a spectator perspective. All the events went on schedule. It seems like everything from that perspective was good. And I think from the performance of the athletes themselves, I think that was phenomenal. And some people, including myself, expected that. However, I think the majority of people were sort of apprehensive about what the quality was going to be like, given the fact that people had challenges preparing, particularly finding places to train. The evidence suggests that they did. And there were so many records. We had young people especially were performing, exceeding their expectations. Quite a lot of people had their season's best. A lot of national records were broken. So I think it was an extremely successful event, given the period in which it's been held and the various challenges that the organizers and athletes faced in arriving at this momentous moment in the history of the Olympics. So I think from that perspective, it was quite successful. From Grenada's perspective, our team this year was quite small, only 4 athletes. Number of injuries, so we only managed 4 athletes. Nevertheless, I think they performed well. We expected better, but life is like that. When you're dealing with the sport of athletics, you're dealing with that instrument, if you can use that term, called the human body, that is subjected to so many variables, and anything can happen. In a sense, success at the international level in the field of athletics really require total preparation, it requires blessings from God. One has to be very fortunate. Despite all the preparation you can make, that body can break down at any time. That engine that you're pushing so hard, and you cannot replace a bolt, a steering end, or an engine. So, there are so many variables. Everything have to come together at the right time. I mean, if you look at the javelin, of which Anderson participated in, there were 3 guys who were in the last 6 months throwing way above 80 and 2 in the 90s. They failed to perform, and they did not even medal. These are the variables that you have to contend with when you're dealing with the sport of athletics. Unfortunately, Anderson did not make the final cut. He could not make the 83 minimum standard. And quite interestingly, we saw at the end of the day, we had an Indian winning its first gold medal for India. And he was the under 20 World Olympics a few years ago. So he has come through the ranks just as Anderson has. And he just peaked at the right moment. I think his technique was flawless. And he was able to beat a much more experienced team of competitors who have been performing at the highest level over a sustained period. So it's very, very interesting. But it really brings home the point that you have to peak at the right time. Of course, our expectations were very high for Lyndon. As you know, Lyndon has performed at the highest level, winning the NCAAs. He's well recognized, at the international level as one of the top 10 participants in that sport. He has had some challenges in the past, on occasions when we thought that he was going to medal, specifically in recent World Championships when he failed to score a point in one of his favorite events. Now that is significant, and you cannot fail to get a point in any one of the 10 events and expect to finish in the top 7, 8. It's not possible. So I think before I say anything, you have to recognize this is possibly the hardest event. Every event is difficult. But when you have to perform at your peak at 10 events, the versatility, the range that you have to use, utilizing different muscles, and an athlete who specializes in one event, he's training particular muscles that can give him that specific advantage to deal with that specific event. In the case of this particular event, it is 10 different events that utilizes different parts of your body. And so it is the most difficult, you could say, the Ironman of athletic events. And so you have to recognize that, right? So it's a very difficult thing, and any injury, as you recognize, just about half of or say 30 to 40% of the guys who start these events do not complete for a variety of reasons. So we have to applaud his efforts. I was a little bit disappointed, and the reason being, to win in that particular event, you have to exceed your best times and distances and heights, or equal them. You cannot have mediocre performances and expect to medal. And I think in Lyndon's case, there's some key events that he have done well that he did not maximize. Now, every athlete doing that particular event, you are not best at some things. So you have to make sure in the events that you're best at, you maximize the opportunity by equaling your best or exceeding it. If you do not do that, you will have difficulties because in your weak event, while you may improve marginally, your chances of success is to be consistent and exceeding your distances, your heights, your jumps at the right time. And I think he did not capitalize on some of the 2 or 3 of the events. He did well for instance, in the javelin, he was second, in the discus, he was third, I think. But the shot put, he was way below his best, So all things have to come together. Nevertheless, I think he did well. And an interesting thing about that particular event, you are in the eyes of the world for a sustained period. So the world is seeing a Grenadian athlete for a long period during the athletic event because you are performing 10 times. So the visibility that we got from him being there in that particular event, I think, is good for Grenada. We are etching ourselves in the calendar of Olympic events and the minds of people across the world who are beginning to say, well, this little country has diverse talent and skills in athletics. So they're seeing performances in more than one event, not just running. So I think his effort is commendable. And it will be a travesty to perform at the highest level sustained like this and not medal in it. So I hope he does not give up and there's one more shot. He's now 29. The winner is 32, the Canadian guy. So I think he has one more shot. And I'd like to see him, and I'd also like to see Kurt come back, to provide some competitive support from that perspective. Melanie, as you know, have had some challenges ever since she got a bronze in the junior level. And we had tremendous hopes for her. But she sustained injuries, and it doesn't appear that she has gotten over, despite the long attempts of recovery over the last 5 years or so. So she ran the relay in the NCAA, and she did an extremely good leg. So we were optimistic and said, hey, it looked like she's back. She started the race quite well. And I think around 80 meters or so, had to pull up. That was extremely unfortunate. And it's a very difficult thing for any athlete to deal with. After, your dreams, hopes, and aspirations are dashed, despite all your preparation, despite all the resources that have gone into, and you get there and you are disappointed, So just imagining those people who fall started, it's not an easy thing from a psychological perspective to treat with. And so I hope that further treatment will be able to bring her back to the health. So it's difficult to say what her future holds at this point in time, but it has been a very difficult upward journey. And of course, we come to the king himself, Hirani. And I don't need to explain to the Grenadians the challenges that he has encountered since winning gold in 2012 and the difficulty he has experienced with the coming to fore of his health challenges. So we are all very tentative because he did not do much pre-Olympic running. At his outings, he looked good, but many of us are saying, yeah, but he's not there yet in terms of medaling. But I think when we looked at his 2 rounds in the Olympics, particularly his second round where he did 43.88, I was certain that he was going to medal, but gold, in my mind, he needed to be more explosive in the last 80 meters. And I think the body didn't support his goals on this occasion, where he needed to be blasting, the tank appeared to be, half empty. But we are happy once again, Grenada was on the podium, winning 3 medals in 3 successive Olympics is a tremendous achievement, you know. Of the 193 countries around the world, much less than 100 medals, you know. So we are in elite company. So we owe a lot to King Kirani James. I think his record speaks for itself. Medaling in the 400 meters in 3 successive Olympics is extremely difficult. I think no one has done it before. They have had individuals medal in other events. We saw the Polish young lady in the hammer throw, winning gold, 3 successive Olympics. Well, this is phenomenal, you know. So we are happy for our showing at the Olympics. Going forward, it is going to be extremely challenging. Producing any Olympian is a gigantic task. It calls for a lot of resources. It calls for focus in the right directions. Because as a small country, we do not have much resources. So the little we have to ensure that we have optimum use and the money goes into the right place. I think we do have some challenges at the athletic arena in Grenada. We have to redouble our efforts and we have to put our resources where it counts. And where it counts is in developing our young athletes. If you look at Grenada now, there is tremendous talent at the kids level. Athletics is a very popular sport. Basically, every educational institution have an athletics meet, starting at the kindergarten. And if you go around and you look at the kindergarten sports, it gives us tremendous hope for the future. When you see the talent, they are motivated and inspired by our performance at the international level. And a lot of kids at this age are interested. We have the most parental interest at the early stages. That have to be harnessed and they need to be encouraged to continue. Because as they grow older, you see less parental influence, less parental support. That needs to change.
Identifying the young talent is one thing, but actually nurturing and developing them is another. And we're going to get into that in a short while. But in the meantime, let me welcome to the program this morning the recently elected president of the Grenada Amateur Swimming Association, Mr. Neil Francis. He is joining us this morning. Mr. Francis, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
There, happy to have you. So I understand, we had a little bit of problems this morning, but happy to have you joining us this morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
That Mr. Moses did a good job in giving us some time for you to get onto the program and recapping how the track and field athletes performed at the Olympics. So now that you've joined us, from your point of view, let's look at our swimmers now. We had 2 swimmers very early in the competition in the Olympics. Delron Felix and Kimberly Ince were in action, representing us in the 100-meter backstroke and 100-meter freestyle, respectively. As the recently elected president of GASA, the Amateur Swimming Association, your overall thoughts on how our 2 swimmers performed at the Olympics?
Blossom, we are extremely happy with the performance of our athletes at the Olympics. A small island, and the fact that it's something that's relatively new to us, at least at that level. So we are happy to have had Delron and Kimberly compete, and we're quite happy with the results thus far. And we are looking at ways and means that we can help each and every one of the swimmers improve their performance overall.
There are 2 young swimmers, both making their Olympic debut. And for those who are unaware, just remind us how recently you were elected as president of GASA and the assistance that the association has given to our young swimmers preparing for athletics, especially Kimberly, who is currently sitting her CSEC exams. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry. Can you ask? Yes.
Oh, I was asking the assistance that, first of all, how recently you were elected as president of GASA and the assistance the association has given to Kimberly and Delron, especially with Kimberly preparing and sitting actually her CSEC exams.
Okay, yeah. Concerning my action as president, I have been functioning in this capacity for the past month. So it's a relatively new appointment. And in terms of the assistance and support that has been given to our swimmers, now we understand the challenges that we are going through with this world pandemic and whatnot. So in terms of psychological support and whatnot, we have been there for them. We've been rallying behind them all the way, encouraging them, making sure that they understand that we are with them. As an association, we would love to be able to do more. And but at the point in time, we are trying our very best with the limited resources that we have. And so we have been behind them 100%. Any way that we can have been assistance to them, we have been. And I'm sure that they can testify.
Every time our swimmers perform on the regional or international stage comes the conversation of the establishment, the construction of an Olympic-sized swimming pool, improving on what we currently have at Good Hope. Is there any latest that you can tell us in terms of ensuring that we get the facilities that our swimmers need to better prepare them for regional and international events, especially the Olympics, or including the Olympics, I should say?
Well, I must say that it has been in the making for some time. We have had much challenges in terms of location and so forth. In recent times, in the past year and a half, the government has allotted some land for the construction of the pool, which is supposed to be at the Grenada National Stadium property. And we are currently at the stage of awaiting bids to be tendered from contractors for the construction of the pool. So there's a lot of technical work that has been going on behind the scenes in terms of meeting the requirements for a pool that is fit for competitive purposes. And so as a result, it's taken a lot of time and effort in putting together all the pieces of the picture to make it happen.
Now let's look at the development of our athletes. Like Mr. Moses just recently said, we have a lot of young track and field athletes coming up. And from the swimming point of view, I know there are a lot of swimmers as well in the pool, out the pool, doing what they need to do to improve on themselves. How can we nurture our young athletes? How can we develop our athletes so that they can get to the stage where they can compete among the best at the Olympics? Competing locally in your school meet is one thing. Regionally, Carif CC Can is another, but to get to the Olympic stage, how can we help our young athletes get to the Olympic level of competition?
But the association has been assessing as fast as time goes by and we meet different circumstances, different situations, and different demands are placed on us. We've been trying our best to meet those where the athletes are concerned. And so a lot of training and seminars have been done in terms of preparing them psychologically as well as preparing them physically. So for instance, this month, I believe, we're supposed to have a coach who is coming back on his way back from the Olympics, who will be coming to do technical work with our swimmers. And it's not only for swimmers of that age group, but it's for all ages. It's open for all ages so that we can learn proper technique and so forth. We recently had someone who was working with them in terms of building their self-esteem and psychological development. And we hope to continue with programs of this nature to ensure that they are prepared and ready to compete on any level whatsoever.
Mr. Moses, how can we develop our track and field athletes?
Developing a track and field athletes, it's a holistic approach that, or any sport for that matter. Successful athletes is a function of a number of things. One, you must have an enabling environment. You must have the professional facilities that athletes can be trained. Where they can train, you must organize competitive events to expose them, to test their levels of preparedness, to gauge their development. You must have adequate coaching capacity, knowledge and skills, and most importantly, the dedication and commitment on the part of those individuals to go out and do the work. You must have knowledgeable officials who understand the nuances of the sport. They have a very critical role to play. You must have the input of other key stakeholders, that's parents, teachers, the media, sponsors. So you have to bring together a range of virtually all elements of the sport must fit. Athletics in Grenada has a tremendous history, over 100 years. We have been doing well. It's recognized throughout the Caribbean that the structure of Grenada's athletics is one of the best, similar to that of Jamaica, where at its core pillar is the structured educational system that we have, where you have athletics at the kindergarten, athletics at the primary school, culminating with athletics at the secondary school level. And that structure produces and feeds the talent and quality that can then go on to eventually become Olympians. And if that chain is weak at any level, we begin to have problems. And right now, we are having some challenges with athletics, that system in the Grenada's context, where particularly at the secondary level, there are significant weaknesses that have reflected itself, particularly in the last 7 to 8 years, where the secondary school system is no longer functioning and performing as it should. There isn't that collaboration between the educational and the physical confluence. Now, holistic education is...
Okay, we seem to be having...
understood and appreciated as the desire. And what we have happening is physical education at the secondary school level have not been given the attention it should. At one point in time, virtually every school had physical education teachers who were trained in all the disciplines. They attended the Athletic Association coaching programs. Over the last 7, 8 years, we've been having lots of challenges where coaches are saying they are not allowed to do what they should do. They are moved to teach other things. And so if you attended our premier event, which is the Intercall in the last 7, 8 years, and you understand your athletics, you will see declining performances. You will see a wide gap. You will see 3 outstanding athletes, and the other 17, 18 are way behind. They are not properly prepared. You will see so many technical shortcomings. They cannot start a race. So many things. That means that at the school level, the right things are not happening. And it's something the Athletic Association been raising with the relevant officials, and we are yet to see any significant alteration in that status. So we have some concerns. Over the years, we have seen a decline in clubs. We have been able to rekindle that. So we see the club structure coming back to the fore. And that club structure traditionally would have captured our athletes graduating from high school, and they continue. So without that club structure, what you'll have happening is we have a lot of retirees from the sport of, or all sports, at age 15 and 16. That's crazy. they're not yet maximizing their youthful potential, and they're dropping out of the sport because you do not have a framework within which they can operate. That has been compounded with our current scenario where when you graduate from high school, you go to TAMCC. Now, kids are coming out 14, 15, 16, 17 years. You're going to TAMCC, and there is no athletic program at that level. So that's a major weakness. So we are losing a lot of our raw talent. We are failing to produce or give kids opportunities to maximize their potential in every area. In this particular case, in the area of sport. And I don't understand why, despite all the discussions in the past, an institution like TAMCC yet to have a sporting program that can allow the kids leaving secondary school to enter. So the few who are really dedicated and the aggressive coaches may get some of these athletes to join clubs. But our real structure is disintegrating slowly, and we need to pay particular attention to that. And all the athletic association can do is articulate, because we do not control the structures that exist to ensure. And if you compare the countries in the Caribbean who are being extremely successful, it's because they make the model work. In Jamaica, it is working very well. The factory is producing. A key component of that is the role of alumni. You know, at one point in time, what we call esprit de corps was very important. You know, you go to Queen's Park during an intercall and people will be supporting their school, doing all sorts of things. That has to translate into action, into funding, you know, and you wonder what is going on, you know. That still exists in Jamaica. And Jamaica now has gotten to the stage where high schools now are giving scholarships to kids around the Caribbean. We have 6 Grenadian athletes who are now in Jamaican high schools. St. Vincent have about a dozen. How is that possible? Where are they getting the resources? Because they are growing, alumni are playing a very significant role, and they're doing the things that the North Americans have been doing for a while. So a lot of kids don't have to leave Jamaica to go to the US anymore, you know, to be trained and to do well. And we have to build that capacity, and unfortunately, we're slipping.
But
so
even
unless we protect our core, we'll continue to have challenges.
But even if the GAA can't play a major role in what currently exists, can the organization start its own program? Or if you don't want to call it a program, you can call it, a mission, where you can help develop our athletes. Because to depend on the clubs or respective schools, can the GAA do its own thing in developing our athletes?
They have been trying, but resources is a challenge. I mean, just think about it. You have control over your school system. Your kids go there, there are rules, regulations, teachers. You cannot compete with that. It does not happen. I give you an example. We have trained close to 200 coaches in the last 30 to 40 years. Some have died, some have traveled, but you do not have 20 active coaches in athletics in Grenada, and that remains a challenge. Only last week, we graduated 27 or 28 young coaches after a 2-week level 1 training. And the challenge is, how do you keep them in the sport? Outside of a structure, this is primarily voluntary. You don't have the resources to pay the coaches. So they have to, on their own, decide, I'm committed to this. They get up in the mornings, to go on the afternoons on a playing field where they can find it, because we have a major challenge in St. George's. We have less playing fields that we used to have 20, 30 years ago. You go to Tantine on an evening, you can't find a space to do certain events. You can't even contemplate throwing a javelin in Tantine. There are dozens of people are cutting off a small portion of the park where they want to do something. In Queen's Park, at one time growing up, we had 6 or 7 playing fields. We basically have 3, and 2 were not available for the majority of the population. And we have not cut it up nicely, and it's the only flat land we have in St. George's, and we're doing other things with it. So planning has been a problem. So we do not have resources So that's going to be a challenge for individual coaches taking on initiative to bring small groups together, which we are urging. So we cannot compete with a well-established test and tried structure. So I think the focus has to be on making sure that structure works as it's supposed to be and it used to be done. We have the capacity to do it. That doesn't mean that we do not have a responsibility. We are training, we are exposing, we are trying to raise resources, but that is limited. But at its core, you have to rely on volunteerism to continue to coach. You don't have the resources say to employ them. Within the organized school structure, you have the resources to pay them because they are teachers who can be exposed. What is required is they be encouraged and allowed to spend time ensuring that the kids, a lot of them complain the focus is on passing exams, and so everything else is secondary. And I think they have to revisit that practice if in fact the reports are true. But we look at the reality and you see the output, there is a decline.
Mr. Francis, is it a similar situation for GASA in terms of the reach it has in developing our athletes and nurturing our young talent, our young swimmers?
Well, yes, in truth and in fact, there has been a number of challenges, as Mr. Moses would have alluded to, because where athletes are coming from out of the same and similar environment. So we do have the same challenges. However, we, as an association, as the covering body for swimming, we've been looking at creative ways of developing the sport holistically. For instance, one of the programs that we now have to ensure the existence of the sport is that we have partnered with the government of Grenada to expand the athletes, the base of athletes, in terms of offering the learn to swim at the schools, right, at the primary school level, and from there we find would often take an active interest in the sport, and that interest then spills over. My children, for instance, that learn to swim program, primary school, and it has led to them now swimming, and they are actually participating in swimming active, sometimes representing Grenada on meets at regional meets. So we do have that kind of system in place to help broaden the base of our swimmers. I know that there are other programs as they learn to swim that's happening around about the island, that we have partnered with these persons also, who have that persons come to first of all learn to swim and be water safe, and also to help back the interest amongst children, because we have right now, we just had the learn to swim they have had teaching, they had coaches teaching right around the island from St. George's all the way up to St. Patrick's in the north. So it's definitely, swimming is definitely looking up, and we are looking at other creative ways of expanding swimming and taking our swimmers to the next level.
Gentlemen, let's take a break and then we're going to come back and continue the discussion. We're speaking with officials of the respective associations of the athletes who represented Grenada at the Olympics. We have the interim president of the Athletic Association, Aaron Moses, and president of the Grenada Amateur Swimming Association, Neil Francis. To the point, we'll be right back.
GBN, in association with the Grenada Development Bank and the Agricultural Shop, presents the GBN exclusive Taking Agriculture Forward, a two-part 2-hour forum on August 11th and 18th from 8 p.m. on GBN Television 7 and 11, K105 FM, and on all GBN's social media platforms. This forum will discuss primary agriculture and opportunities, agricultural extension and support, challenges facing the sector, and policies and food system sustainability. Join us on August 11th and 18th as we speak to the experts on taking agriculture forward.
Hey folks, you're invited to tune in to Grenada Music to the World program hosted by Eugene Gittens on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 noon on Classic Radio 105.5, 105.9, Hot FM 98.5, 98.7, GBN TV, and all their social media platforms. The only totally local music program in Grenada, representing all genres of music. So it's Green's Music to the World on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 noon on GBN with the music icon himself, Mr. Eugene Gittens. See you then.
Protect yourself and our community from COVID-19. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. If soap and water are not available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer with at least 70% alcohol. Use a tissue when blowing your nose, sneezing, or coughing. Immediately discard the tissue properly and wash or sanitize your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Let's do our part to ensure that each and every Grenadian remains healthy. To stay up to date, visit the Government of Grenada's webpage or the Ministry of Health's Facebook page. For more information, contact the Ministry of Health's hotline by calling 53-VIRUS. This has been a public service announcement brought to you by the Ministry of Health.
Welcome back to The Point, speaking with President of GASA, the Swimming Association, Mr. Neil Francis, and Interim President of the Athletic Association, Aaron Moses. Let me see if I can quickly get to some of the questions from our viewers and listeners. Somebody on WhatsApp is stating, with so many hills in Grenada, physical fitness should not be a problem for athletes. Just walk and run. Also do some gardening work by planting, caring for, and reaping crops. And stop eating too much breadfruit and hog features. This brings to mind the question of the diets of our athletes. How do we ensure that they eat what they should and don't eat what they shouldn't?
Well, that's a continuous challenge. I think a healthy diet is absolutely necessary for not only healthy bodies, but you cannot be a top athlete if you don't have a healthy body. But given the level of exertion and training that athletes are required to engage in, will periodically necessitate that you need to add something more. And so right nutrition is a fundamental requirement, and that is costly, particularly when we're getting at the professional level. There are a number of supplements that athletes need to take, and that costs money. The stark reality is many of our athletes come from relatively simple homes that do not have the ability to prepare those special meals that are required to give additional energy to athletes. A lot of parents, you basically are struggling to put at least one meal as required at the right time of the day. And so you find that a lot of our athletes do not have the right nutrients intake. And so that remains a challenge, and it calls for resources, which is a challenge. But despite that, we have done well because of our lifestyle, which is changing, by the way. When a kid is athletic, when a kid is doing physical things regularly, all that helps to build the body. We do our traditional diet is carbohydrates based. That provides some energy, but like I said, we need more. But it's something that is a constant need, as we try to take our athletes to the next level. Because at the competitive level, it is absolutely necessary that you need to take concentrated, supplements to give you that added energy requirement to perform at the highest level.
Mr. Francis, I see you nodding. I take it you agree with what Mr. Moses is saying. And is it a challenge to keep our swimmers on their respective diets?
Well, I will agree with what Mr. Moses is saying, definitely. And yes, it is sometimes a challenge to keep, children, especially the younger swimmers. You know what it's like for kids. Always like to indulge in sweets and, all soft drinks and whatnot.
Right.
But bit by bit, we have been doing seminars with them so that they understand the importance of healthy eating. Whenever we have or we host any swim meets or activities, we always encourage persons to have healthy snacks, carrot sticks, bananas, watermelon, so forth. So we always ensure that the swimmers remain properly hydrated, and because that is of optimal importance for them to get the best performance, and so that is definitely something that's an issue. I know someone who always speaks to the fact that it is so expensive to maintain a healthy diet in Grenada. But the truth is, you go to the supermarkets and you look at the price of vegetables and fruits and what have you, it's really exorbitant. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we have so much wastage. I mean, you drive through certain areas and you see the amount of mangoes that's being wasted. You see the amount of, what's that next fruit? Carambola is the next fruit that I observe. There's a lot of wastage. I don't think people take enough advantage of the cherries that we have, which are so rich in vitamin C and so forth, which helps to build the immune system and help to fight off diseases. And even now that we are going through this pandemic, I'm trusting that persons are paying more attention to diets, because we have to make sure that our immune system is kept to the best that we can possibly keep it to ensure that we can fight off any possible infections.
You make a valid point about the wastage. It hurts my feelings sometimes seeing mango on the ground and I can't pick it up and eat it. I want to also briefly discuss the situation of having some of our athletes based overseas. And how much does that help, or if it hurts our preparations for regional international meets. Kirani, we know, is based overseas swimming. Daron and Kimberly are based here, but other swimmers like Kerry Oliver, Oriolua Cherubin, they're based overseas. How does that play into preparing for regional international meets?
Well, as far as the swimmers are concerned, it has not been too much of a challenge, because one of the advantages with the swimmers who do train overseas is that they have access to even better facilities than we have here. So, for instance, one of the challenges that we have with our local athletes is the current facility that we have. When our swimmers have to train and compete in a pool that is less than 25 yards, and then you go to an international or regional meet and they have to face a 50-meter pool, which is more than double the length of what we have. It means in terms of your training style, in terms of being able to turn at a certain distance and so forth, it helps with the physical fitness, and as well as the mental capacity is definitely affected, because where you're accustomed to turning and the distance you're accustomed to swimming, it's significantly different when you do the international and regional meets that have better facilities. Now, so as I said, it's an advantage for swimmers who are abroad because they have experienced coaches who work with them. They are put on diet programs and so forth. They have better training facilities. And so that is why we are pushing to make sure that we can enhance the facilities here locally, where we've just made a significant investment in terms of gym equipment and so forth that is going to be made available for athletes to use in the very near future and so forth. And we're looking at other ways of making sure that there is proper development.
Mr. Moses?
I want to support my colleague in the mental, psychological, as well as technical disadvantages you do not have a and, I think the swimmer done extremely well making that adjustment and performing that the way they do. I think also that the swim education has been well run and they deserve much better. And a national swimming pool is an absolute must. I must admit, of course, I think it's a bad decision to place it in Queen's Park. I don't think it's maximizing the opportunities of space based on earlier comments I made, but I leave that there. But I think it deserves to be treated much better. We are making mistakes that we would not be able to repair for decades to come. We are not that disadvantaged as the swimmers because we do have reasonable facilities in Grenada. But certainly out there, given their resource base, the facilities are much better. So athletes going out there, if they find themselves in the right places, they can do much better because not all cases. There are a number of athletes who leave here and go to junior colleges that are not better than we are in Grenada in terms of capacity, training, skills, and knowledge. They may have good physical plans. So we have to be very careful. And in addition to that, there are different programs. It's interesting to note that Jamaica recognized they had a challenge 30, 40 years ago where all the athletes, you're trying to get to North America, and the minute they got there, their careers was over. A lot of injuries because the system was structured to get as much out of you as possible without paying due care and attention. And that is why they attempted and placed a lot of focus on building the home capacity. And you see where they have gone. So people are now going to Jamaica from all parts of the world to train. And it is possible, it can be done. But generally, resources make the major difference. And if there are better resources out there from an athletics point of view, we have to continue to maximize. What it also allows is that it gives kids a second chance. Unfortunately, whether it's a psychological thing or what, a lot of our kids do not maximize the opportunity at our secondary level and they wake up late. And so the North American system gives them a second chance. It's a different environment. Sometimes more support is available. And so, opportunity should be maximized. But I think we also have to focus on building our internal capacity. If we do what is right, we can achieve just as much at home as out there. Generally, there are some specific events where the facilities out there lends itself better to, Then, of course, being in a bigger space, you have more competitive activity that also contributes to development. So you have to understand the benefits and the costs and be able to be discerning enough to maximize the good opportunities and stay away from the bad.
I really wanted to get into some financial issues as well, but unfortunately we have run out of time this morning. But we would definitely have another conversation in soon time, because our athletes are always performing regionally, internationally. So I'm sure I'll have either one of you back or both for a future program. So I just want to say thank you, gentlemen, for being my guests this morning, and congratulations to the associations, our athletes, parents, coaches of the Olympians, and all our national athletes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. President of the Grenada Amateur Swimming Association, Mr. Neil Francis, and Interim President of the Grenada Athletic Association, Aaron Moses, thank our guests so very much. And once again, going to use the opportunity to say congratulations and thank you to our Olympians that represented Grenada at the just concluded games. Kirani James, Anderson Peters, Melanie Rodney, Lyndon Victor, Kimberly Ince, and Delron Felix. Thank each and every one of you. That's the end of my time for today. And the end of the program. At this moment, I believe we would be switching to a GBN Facebook page feed, our social media feed, for those of you on our visual platforms. We're going to cut to the point, and then we're going to go over to our Facebook feed with a standoff. I would call it a standoff between members of the Royal Grenada Police Force and some jab in St. Andrew. The standoff has been going on for just about half an hour, and it seems to be getting more intense as time goes on. So we want to bring that for our viewers on our visual platforms. For those of you on Classic, feel free to tune into GBN TV channel 7, 11 and 20 or any of our social media pages to actually see what is taking place. Let's just say the thing getting sticky. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, everybody. Bye-bye.